On this episode of Locked On Canadiens, the Montreal Canadiens returned home this weekend to a victory, and Laura Saba also returned home. And we'll get into all that in today's episode.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to episode 1185 of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. Doing show ensures you don't miss an episode and it supports the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as @Maybe It's Ian, and I am finally rejoined by the wonderful active stick Laura Saba. Laura, welcome back to the show. How does it feel?
I have missed the show. I've missed our listeners. I've been so jealous that you've put out so many good shows and I haven't been part of them. I was listening and there was a lot of thoughtful stuff there, a lot of stuff to think about. So even though I wasn't able to catch the games because I was on the other side of the world, I did get to hear your thoughts, and it was very thought provoking. And I did want to thank you also for carrying the show for an entire week without me here.
That's what we do. Next man up. Those are the rules. I'm glad you're back. It's nice to have another square here on the show. The episode K filled it and I enjoyed. Otherwise, it's just too much me. So very, very happy to have my pal Laura back. We've got a lot to cover on this episode today. Montreal gets a big win over the Columbus Blue Jackets on Saturday. We will break down that matchup. And then we've got to kind of hustle through our weekly recap and forecast because Montreal's right back at it on Monday night. So we need to sort of break down the week that happened and also set up the week to come because, as Marty St. Louis says, the schedule does not stop. But we start on Saturday with Montreal's big win over the Columbus Blue Jackets. I set it up all last week in saying that if you want to prove you are not a basement-dwelling team, this is a game you must win. And look at that. The Canadiens did just that. A very convincing victory over the Columbus Blue Jackets, a 5-1 score. Couple multi-point games in that one. Caulfield had 2 assists, doubling his or tripling his assists for the season. He went in with 1, comes out of there with 3. A great game from Mike Matheson, who was definitely in need of one. He had a goal and an assist. And on the Shea Weber not retirement night, but his Ring of Honor night, he hammered one home from the point on the power play, which is, we give Matheson a lot of crap for his poor shot selection from the point, but I feel like that one was for Shea.
That was poetic.
Yeah. We should probably talk about Shea Weber too. Arpon Basu said that was probably the most awkward moment of Shea Weber's life, him standing at center ice with an entire arena clapping and cheering him on with a spotlight on him because he's just not that kind of guy. What is the Shea Weber? I kind of had my piece about it, last week. What did the Shea Weber era mean to you? And what in retrospect, how do you feel about how that era of the Canadiens will be revisited?
I think the problem that I've always had with this is that the Shea Weber era coincided with an era where Marc Bergevin gave away what was supposed to be the Canadiens' core, right? Like if you look at the trade in isolation, it evens out, right? It evens out in terms of, where did the teams get to, who won a Stanley Cup and all of that. I think Shea Weber brought a different dimension to this team, and I think he does deserve to be recognized and honored for that. But we have to look at it in a vacuum. We have to look at the Shea Weber era outside of that trade, because if the second you bring in that trade, then you start contextualizing it. Then you start talking about, what about Max Pacioretty? Like, who was supposed to be this core, right? And like it goes all the way back to, I think Ryan McDonough was supposed to be part of that core. And so, it either symbolizes lost opportunities, or you take all of that context out and you just look at Shea Weber as a Montreal Canadien, and you look at, on this podcast, the first couple of years of this podcast, we would just talk about how they need to play him less because he was literally broken. He was old. He was playing the most minutes on this team, carrying the toughest assignments on this team. And this should have been a time where Shea Weber should have been able to step back. There should have been someone else in that number 1 defenseman spot, somebody else complementing that. And Shea Weber should have been able to reap the benefits of playoff runs, right? That's what I feel sad for, is that the Canadiens didn't give him what he gave the Canadiens. And I always criticized his usage. I never criticized him as a person or a player, but I always criticize his usage, and I think like that to me, it just feels like when I think about players like him, I think about sacrifice, right? And sacrificing your body for the sport, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. It cut his
Mm.
career short, and he was never able to attain that one thing that he wanted to, which makes me really sad because they got close. And I think the one thing that I do want to remember from the Shea Weber era is that cup run because he
Yeah.
dragged them. He and Carey Price and Stahl and whoever, Corey Perry, I guess.
Yeah, Corey Perry. Yoel Armia had some big goals on that run.
There you go, right? Like they drag the younger players kicking and screaming past like Dominic Ducharme's inept coaching. And
Yeah.
so that is what I want to think about the Shea Weber era about. Because as soon as you add in the trade and the context, like it dampens it all.
Yeah, and he's where he belongs, right? Like he belongs in the Hall of Fame. He belongs in the Canadiens Ring of Honor. It was, in retrospect, very cool to see Shea Weber in a Montreal Canadiens jersey. That's why, if you're watching the YouTube feed, I'm currently wearing my Shea Weber jersey. I thought it was fitting for the day. Back to the game against Columbus. It was a game that was really never in danger for the Montreal Canadiens. They led early. They scored first. Both of these teams went into that game with the same affliction, in that if they do not score first, they lose. Um, Columbus ended up tying it at 1, and that was the closest Columbus got in the rest of that game. I thought Montreal played particularly well early. The second period got a little squirrely. Third period, same, but I think in the third period they got lucky with a couple of good shots, and that was really the end there. Caulfield, like I mentioned, 2 points, but neither of them goals, which is a very rare feat for Cole Caulfield. They weren't just random assists. He was playmaking at an incredibly high level on Saturday night. I don't know what got into him, why he decided that was the part of his game he wanted to, you know, have dominate on Saturday, but it worked. Is if he adds, because going into the game, I think he was what, like 12 and 1, like 12 goals, 1 assist. If he adds that playmaking development to his game, what do you think that does for what does that do for the Montreal Canadiens, like as a whole, as a holistic unit moving forward?
Like, I think it adds more wins, right? Inevitably, because when he's playing like that, it means that he's not the only person scoring on this team. Because we've seen so many
Yeah.
games where, Cole Caulfield is one of the two scorers, right? Like he's the most consistent scorer on this team, or goal scorer on this team, I should say,
Yeah.
not points, right? Well, when you add in those points, right? Let's say instead of like, going for 40 goals, he's doing 30 goals and like, I don't know, 20 assists or something like that. That changes the dynamic of the scoreline, I think. And it adds more wins, right? Like look at any games the Canadians lose by a point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And it's very odd that the Canadiens scored 5 goals and none of them came off the stick of Cole Caulfield. Like that's kind of a different kind of win to me, right? Like
Right.
they're finding that secondary scoring. They're finding that depth scoring.
To me, that's a positive.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and I said going into that game, I said I wanted the defense to chip in with a goal. And look at that. Mike Matheson was the first one of the game. Hudson had a couple of assists, I think, in that one. Just 1 assist in that one, actually. He had 2 in the Buffalo game. I thought Matheson and Hudson was going to be a disaster, and actually, it was pretty good. I don't know
how
if I
much of
would do
that
it all
was
that
the
often.
opponent, though?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, I think I don't know if I would do that all the time.
I
But
would
it was
like to
nice.
see them do it again and see how it works, like
Yeah, especially
against
with
like a really good team.
yeah, I was going to say, especially with the opponents they have coming up this week, some really high, powered offenses coming into Montreal. Um, but yeah, the Columbus game, I thought Montreal took care of business the way that they needed to against a team that is not particularly good and a team that was playing their third game in 4 nights, something that we will see in the upcoming week as well. It's nice to see Montreal take care of business when they need to, um, and not fold against I can't even say lesser opponent because there's not, I think right now there's maybe one team who the Canadians could feasibly punch down to. Columbus can't be a team that you let come in and beat you. And Montreal hasn't done that recently. I think they said at the end of the broadcast it was 6 straight wins for the Canadians over the Blue
Columbus,
Jackets. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's it. And so for me, like every time they have a win like this against, let's say, not maybe an inferior opponent, but an opponent that is, let's say, in the lower half of the standings, I always want them to draw from it, right? Like I want them to take the good that happened and like get some confidence, like get the intangibles. But what inevitably ends up happening is that the tactics on the ice or the execution on the ice like sort of beats that confidence, and it just
Yeah.
it then turns into a spiral of a few games. So what I really want, and I know we're going to talk about this in the next segment, what I really want is for them to draw from this experience against better opponents.
Yep, absolutely. And it's a perfect segue into our weekly recap where we'll take a look at the rest of the week that the Canadians had and determine whether or not we thought it was a good one. And we'll get into that in just a minute. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. PrizePicks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. It's so fun and simple to use, you'll really enjoy playing. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, we are back, Laura. We are back to recap the week, which I have called Maybe It's Ian Week because that's what it was. I'm so happy to have you back and to talk about this week that the Canadians had because it was one of the good ones.
It was good, but I was going to say, you said you're so happy to have me back just as I was about to accidentally remove you from this stream.
Yeah, that's how we know that Laura's back. She's back to ruling with an iron fist as she usually does. Moving on, Montreal had a winning record this week, 2-1-0 in 3 games, 4 out of 6
How
points
did they
grabbed.
do that?
Yeah, I can't. It's funny, like they didn't win consecutive games, and I'm still thinking that this week was one of the better ones that they've had all season.
I mean, it was. I did want to say that, like, I did not see a high scoring game against Buffalo coming.
No, and it was a high scoring game against Buffalo on a Monday afternoon. Like afternoon games are usually like kind of sleepy. This one was bonkers from the jump. It was one of the weirder games that we've seen so far. 7-5 win over the Sabres. They followed that up with a 3-0 loss against Minnesota, where I think that the score is not totally indicative of how the game went. 2-0 with an empty netter is what I would like to think of that, because the Canadians were in that game, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And then the 5-1 win over Columbus means that the Canadians go 2-1-0, and they have a positive goal differential. They had 12 goals for, 9 against. So that does not happen all that often.
12 goals for, like, that's the thing, because like the 9 goals against does happen a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that will happen probably next week, and they only play twice. And I think too, like it's nice that even though they did get shut out, they still averaged 4 goals a game,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. Not something they will do often this season. Maybe not until Patty Laine comes back, but that's the world that we're living in. Suzuki led the way with 5 points, Caulfield with 4, Anderson, Doc, Hudson, and Matheson all with 3. Montreal had 6 point per game players, which is, again, not something we're seeing all that often, but they picked up the points when they needed to, against Buffalo especially. Nick Suzuki turned it on and kind of won them that hockey game, which was really cool to see. And then I thought in the game against Columbus, Caulfield's playmaking was great. Matheson really turned it on. Anderson had a great game. Against Minnesota, the first period was great. Montreal was playing them really tight. It seemed like Montreal got an assignment from their coach, and they all played it to a T. They're just not very good. That was the difference, in that was not coaching. The difference in that was the skill on the ice, which is, what we kind of expect this team to be at this point in time, right? Is we're okay with them not being particularly good.
Right. This is the thing. It's like, we know that they're not good, right? So I honestly, like, the one thing I did want to point out, and I don't know if I'm spoiling the player of the week because obviously you're making this decision this week,
Go for
but
it.
I thought Nick Suzuki playing this week after, there had been like many games in a row. I don't know if it was 3 games or 8 games where we were like, Nick Suzuki needs to be better.
Yeah.
And we kept calling him out. And then, he's the first person to call himself out. But like, for him to like turn it on this way and just like take control of the game, or like get back to what he's able to do. Like I really just, I love Nick Suzuki and I'm so happy he's on this team. Like I love saying that.
Yeah, he definitely turned it on. It's not going to spoil my star of the week. We will get into that in just a few minutes here. But special teams, power play went 3 for 13, 23%. That bumps their season average up, right? They had a good week on the power play. Penalty kill went 9 for 11. That's 81.8%. That bumped their season average up. So we kind of like bemoan special teams in the moment. We kind of get lost in the moment and they really could have used a goal there. They really could have used a stop there from the PK. But generally speaking, both those units working pretty well. They had a 4-on-4 goal as well, which I know isn't a special team, but it's kind of important to be able to play it in those moments.
Absolutely. I did want to maybe ruin the moment and ask about our proprietary stat there. Are you still tracking it?
I are you asking if I have the giveaway stats for this week?
Yeah.
Because absolutely I have the giveaway stats for this week. Against Buffalo 13, and Buffalo had fewer than the Canadiens in that game. But in the remaining 2 games, the Canadiens were not the leader in that game in giveaways. Against Minnesota, they had 9. Minnesota had 10. Against Columbus, they had 7. And Columbus had 18. So
Wow.
these are difference makers for this hockey team. I think that we're not tracking this enough. So I'm going to keep hammering this home because it behooves the Canadiens to play with the puck. I know that that's like not super novel of a thought, but it's getting lost in the fact that like everyone's like, oh, the defensive zone structure's killing them, the goaltending's killing them. Face off, exactly. That's exactly the kind of thing that I think a lot of people are keyed in on, and not the fact that they hand the puck to the other team so easily. It drives me nuts watching this and watching the takes roll in, and we'll get to goaltending in just a second because I have some thoughts there as well. But I gave them a B for the week. Generally,
Okay.
a pretty good effort across the board. Star of the week, I had Cole Caulfield because he was the only player with 2 multi-point games. So
That's
Suzuki
fair.
had 4 in the Buffalo game and then 1 against Columbus, but Caulfield showed up in a couple of games with a couple of points. Again, that multi-assist game against Columbus was interesting because he had 1 on the season coming into it. But my unsung hero of the week is Sam Montembeault, who
Oh.
somehow appeared in all 3 of these games despite not starting one of them, and he won 2 of them, including the one he didn't start. He got the win in Buffalo. He only had to make 4 saves. But on the week, he was a 947.
Nice.
We're all out here real upset about goaltending. Sam Montembeault just put together the quietest 947 week, I think, of all time. He didn't have to, he wasn't flashy. He wasn't making, windmill glove saves, but he was the goalie the Canadiens needed in those games. He kept the Minnesota game close. He kept them within striking distance, even though they couldn't score against a very stingy Minnesota Wild team. Goal saved above expected. Overall positive numbers this week. He was over. He was in the red, so to speak, or in the black rather. So yeah, Sam Montembeault, great week from him. I'm ignoring the other goalie in Caden Primo because it was not a very good week for him, and we are all kind of hand wringing over that. I want to get your take on it because I think a lot of people are trading for another goalie right now. Where are you at with Caden Primo and sort of what we should expect from him moving forward?
I think the leash is not the leash. The leash is very short. That was a
Yeah.
Freudian slip there. I think the question now is where does the replacement come from, right? Are they going to pick
Yeah.
someone up off waivers? Or are they going to bump someone up from Laval when Laval is doing amazing right now, which we will get Scott on to talk about that very soon, we promise. What do you do? Like, do you promote one of the prospects before they're ready or the team they're on is ready to relinquish them? Or do you trade? Like, do you actually give up assets or do you wait to see who ends up on waivers? That's how they got Samuel Montembeault. So
Right.
I don't know, but I think Caden Primo, unfortunately, has this entire season, I think, has shown us that he's not the solution. He's not the next CP.
Yeah, he's not the next starter. I don't even know that he's the next backup for this team. And that's fine. I don't understand people calling up Dobish right now. Chill
Not the
out.
time.
No, and again, people are so certain that Caden Primo will make it through waivers. My argument is that if he goes on waivers, the Philadelphia Flyers have terrible goaltending, and he's Keith Primo's kid. They would claim him in a heartbeat. So I'm not panicking about the goaltending
Yeah.
just yet. I think Montembeau's been fine. He's had a couple of stinker starts, but generally speaking, things are okay.
Also, like, Philadelphia has a goalie curse. Even
It's
good
true.
goalies go there and are bad. So, I mean, there is that. So,
It is true. It is true. So that's the week that was for the Montreal Canadiens. In our next segment, we'll do our weekly forecast and we'll speak about the week to be with games against the Edmonton Oilers and the Vegas Golden Knights, and we'll get into that in just a minute. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find candidates fast. Ditch the busy work, use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And that's one of the things I like the most about Indeed, the confidence that you will not only fill the position quickly, but that the candidates you are matched with will be of high quality matches. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at indeed.com/locked on. Just go to indeed.com/locked on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, the home stretch. We are opening up our week for the Montreal Canadiens. We are right back at it on Monday night against the Edmonton Oilers. Heads up for those on the East Coast and the West Coast, or wherever you're watching the game from. It's not a standard 7 o'clock Eastern start on Monday against Edmonton. It is a 7:30 start, so plan accordingly. Edmonton comes into the game 9-7-2 with 20 points, 5th in the Pacific, 14th overall in the NHL. Very weird schedule against the Canadiens last year. Montreal went 0-2 versus Edmonton, 2 overtime losses, 2 overtime goals by the Edmonton Oilers, neither of those in the shootout. A 2-1 overtime loss and a 3-2 overtime loss, one from Evan Bouchard and one from Leon Draisaitl. Both goals, interestingly, on the power play in overtime. So maybe avoid taking penalties against that very, very high-powered, top-heavy offense.
I was
In
gonna say, speaking of of goaltending curses, like, we started talking about Edmonton. I honestly don't know what to make of them because obviously they were having an inconsistent start to say the least. Stanley Cup hangover team, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, remember last year, they started last year terribly.
Yeah.
They got their coach fired. So it's not out of, this is not unreasonable for the Oilers to have a season like this. In fact, they're at least, you know, I think they're 500, right? Like I think that they're right around where they should, not where they should be. This team should be better. But like I mentioned, it's a very top heavy roster. Montembeau got both starts last year. He went 9-31 against Edmonton, even though he lost both of those games. So again, goaltending kept them in. 3 points from both McDavid and Draisaitl kind of did the Canadiens in last year. Those are guys that you need to be able to stop. This year they're operating at about 2.78 goals for per game, which isn't a lot, and I know that's not a lot because the Canadiens are a tenth of a goal better. So the Oilers are being outscored on a game by game basis by the Montreal Canadiens. So that's not a great start for them. Cole Caulfield be darned. He cannot carry them to a number better than that because of what the rest of this roster looks like. You mentioned the goaltending from Edmonton. They have very mid goaltending. Skinner is an 877 and a 328. Pickard is an 890 and a 249. So the 249 I like from Pickard, but the rest of those stats are kind of icky. Draisaitl has 13 goals. He's your current goal leader in the NHL. He's passed Cole Caulfield for now. He has 24 points for now. I would not bet against Cole Caulfield this year. He is ripping the puck. 24 points in 18 games for Draisaitl, 21 points in 15 games for McDavid, but there's not much secondary scoring for the Edmonton Oilers. The next 3 point scoring leaders for the Oilers are all defensemen. Bouchard, Ekholm with 10 points and Nurse with 9, who we probably won't even see on Monday, considering what Ryan Reeves did to him on Saturday. Got himself suspended for 5 games. The highest scorers not named McDavid or Draisaitl are Janmark and Nugent Hopkins with 8 points, and Hyman also has 8 points. Janmark and Nugent Hopkins have 1 goal each and 7 assists. Hyman is much more, he's being held in check much better than he was last year. So what do you make of this matchup with the Oilers? It seems like they are a team where if you kind of can, no one's going to stop McDavid and Draisaitl, but if you can at least keep them subdued to a certain point, like they kind of did against Kaprizov in the early going against Minnesota.
Yeah.
Can the Canadiens do that? Can they keep them in check? Is that within the realm of possibility for this roster?
I think if they can stop handing them the puck, I think if they can
Great
stop
point,
themselves from
Laura. I
doing
don't know
that.
where you got that from.
Somebody needs to make us a meme or a T-shirt of that. Like, but honestly, I do think that, like, we've seen the Canadiens beat the Oilers even without containing those two, so it's not
Yeah.
out of the realm of possibility. And like bad Canadiens teams too, right? Like in the last couple of years. So for me, I'm not expecting a lot, but I'm still holding out hope. How about that?
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. I think my two keys are protect the puck because that's always going to be a key for the rest of time. If you hand the puck to the other team, you will lose and you will deserve it. Um, and to try your best to contain another 97. They just tried with Kirill Kaprizov, and I thought they did so well, and then it just didn't go so well. It's one of those players where you're not going to stop him. You need to contain him. The part of containing is that you're hoping your offense can at least chip a couple behind them before that guy wakes up. The Canadiens offense against Minnesota did not do that. Maybe they'll be more successful against a much more defensively porous team in Edmonton. Kind of expecting a high scoring game there. So Sam Montembeault, I'm hoping he can stand on his head a little bit. He did last year against Edmonton, but that was last year's Sam Montembeault, who was a really, really, really great goalie for the Montreal Canadiens. All right, moving on to the Vegas Golden Knights game on Saturday. Vegas is a very, very good hockey team. 11-4-2 this season with 24 points. They're first in the Pacific and sixth in the National Hockey League. Last year, Montreal went 0-1-1 against the Oilers, a 6-5 loss at home where Primo started, and a 3-2 shootout loss on the road that Montembeault started. I point that out because one of those numbers is a lot higher than the other one. And it just seems like Primo should not get into either of these games this week because it would be bad for him and the Montreal Canadiens.
God knows there's
Suzuki,
enough time between them. So
yeah, that's it. So they play Monday and then they're off for 4 days because the NHL schedule makes no sense ever. Marty says the schedule doesn't stop except when it absolutely does for 4 days for no reason.
this is not the first time this year either. This is not the
No.
first time. The season is a month and a half old, and they've done this twice now.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the schedule, like the Canadiens have played a lot more games than a lot of other teams. So it's that's always seems to be the case for the Canadiens. I don't know why that is. Last season, Suzuki had 3 points against the Vegas Golden Knights in their season series. Eichel had 4. Matheson and Newhook each had 2 points. Montreal, like they were for Columbus, Montreal will be Vegas's third game in 4 nights. And Mark Stone is currently injured. It's unclear if he'll play. He didn't play last Friday. Not sure where they stand with him there. I know people will make long-term injured reserve jokes at Mark Stone's expense, but he looks like he will not be at 100% if he does play. I kind of think they might just hold him out. Special teams for Vegas. Power plays operating at 34.78%, which is shockingly only good enough for second in the NHL. There is a
Who's
team better
first?
than them. The Winnipeg Jets are first.
What?
Yeah, the Winnipeg Jets, they just lost back-to-back games, but before that, they were like 14-1. Like that's the season the Jets are having. Penalty kill for Vegas is 80% middle of the pack. This is the 13th all-time matchup between the Canadiens and Golden Knights. They're Montreal's 5-5-2.
Regular
So
season?
regular season, correct? Yeah. They don't love to roll in playoff stats with that sort of thing, but that is what it is. Montreal is perfectly 500, 5-5-2 against the Vegas Golden Knights. Eichel is sitting on 27 points in 17 games. Stone and 21-13, who might not play. They have a lot of depth in Vegas. They have 8 players with at least 10 points. So that's something that Montreal is going to have to struggle with in that one. Goaltending, Aiden Hill and Ilya Samsonov are both pretty average goaltending. And when you have scoring like Vegas does, you don't really need great goaltending. What are you looking for in this game against Vegas?
For nobody to die.
Yeah, let's just get through that game. I think that's a perfectly fair
just no
expectation.
injuries. Like, they're not going to win. It's fine. They're going to look terrible against such a good team. It's fine. They don't have depth. It's fine. Just don't die. No injuries, nothing like that. Just survive.
Yeah, I have I have, when you're watching a broadcast, like especially the American broadcast, they'll show on TV like keys to the game. And my keys are very like the stuff that your dad would say when he's watching the Canadiens, which is protect the puck, stay out of the box. Stars have to be the best players. And I wrote that down. I felt like, man, that's such like boring analysis to have thrown out there, but that's my truth and I'm living it. Thoughts on the week as a whole? What would be a successful week for the Canadiens for you if they, how many points would they need for you to call it a win?
1 or 2.
I think 2. Yeah. 3
Yeah.
points and we're dancing in the street. Like that's sort of where I'm looking at this week.
Yeah, 3 points. The next Monday show is totally different.
Yeah. All right, let's hit the trivia and then get out of here. Last episode's question was in honor of Guillaume Latendresse, who I know is going through a tough time right now. He stepped away due to some issues he's dealing with, so thoughts are with him, hoping to see him back in the spotlight soon. But Guillaume Latendresse scored his first goal on November 7th, 2006 against the Edmonton Oilers. Who had the assist? Do you know the answer to this, Laura?
I did not know the answer to this, no.
Saku Koivu and Michael Ryder, two very obvious, they're kind of obvious answers, right? Like that was, to me anyway, I was like, yeah, of course it's those guys.
That was an era.
Yeah, that was that whole question was a vibe. I definitely agree with that. All right, today's question: name the player. Edmonton, Minnesota, Florida, Montreal, Los Angeles. Edmonton, Minnesota, Florida, Montreal, Los Angeles. If you have the answer, put it in the comments on YouTube. We'll pin whoever gets it right and whoever gets it right first. And that's going to do it for us on today's episode of Locked On Canadiens. Thanks so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We are making the jump to Blue Sky. We're Locked On Canadiens there. Laura's at the Active Stick. I am at Maybe It's Ian. We kept it the same. You should be able to find us. Also, my Movember campaign is ongoing. If you have a couple bucks to chip in, go to the description, especially on YouTube. It'll be easier for you to click and throw a couple bucks there if you can. I would really, really appreciate it. That's going to do it for us today. We will see you tomorrow.